Back in 2003, China had only 28,000 miles of high-speed rail. Why only, when that's already a massive system? Because by 2024, the total length of tracks and ties had skyrocketed to a whopping 99,000 miles. That said, it's not like China's railway construction is particularly known for mind-blowing projects. Sure, the country's terrain swings from one extreme to another, but there's almost always an easier route to lay down a railway. However, back in 2014, China started building a 1,000-mile railway where there was just no way around. This time, we're not talking about a mega project, but about a mega roller coaster, 90% of which runs at over 10,000 feet, cutting through hundreds of tunnels and bridges. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention the money. The estimated cost is $50 billion. Anyway, today's going to be interesting, so let's jump in. So, the mega railway. One of the two ends of the route will be in Tibet, or more precisely in the Tibet Autonomous Region of China. This Chinese province is incredibly beautiful. Well, you've probably heard of Everest, the tallest mountain on our planet, and the Himalayas. There you can also find untouched wilderness and otherworldly landscapes. You get the idea. That said, development in rural areas is seriously struggling. First off, this region spans 463,000 square miles, but is home to just 3.6 million people. In other words, there are only 3 people per 0.4 square miles here. The region that ranks second in size among all provinces in China is home to fewer people than, say, the freezing desert lands of Inner Mongolia, where as many as 24 million people live. On top of that, the Tibet Autonomous Region has a struggling economy. Notice how it stands out from the other provinces by color? Well, as of 2023, Tibet is in last place in China in terms of GDP, just 239 billion yuan or $34 billion. And that's even though the government spends more on this poor region than any other. Tibet receives the most government funding and the highest total public spending per capita, especially for healthcare, social welfare, and jobs. Why is the situation in the region like this? The thing is, Tibet is called the roof of the world, and life and development here is no easy task. Yes, the landscape is stunning, but it also makes just about everything more difficult. Just imagine, the average elevation of this region is over 15,000 feet above sea level. And Tibet isn't just one big flat mountain, it's a land of endless variety. In the north and center, plains coexist with countless lake basins, while mountain ranges nearby soar beyond 21,000 feet. The south is a rugged landscape of deep valleys and gorges carved by rivers like the Yarlung Tsangpo. Here, narrow ridges have steep slopes and dramatic elevation changes. The eastern part, in turn, is conventionally called the Sino-Tibetan Mountains and is a system of narrow, high ridges with steep slopes separated by deep valleys and gorges ranging from 8,200 to 9,800 feet deep. In fact, this is why many call eastern Tibet the most impassable part of the entire region. That doesn't mean the region is completely cut off or impossible to get to. The Tibetan city of Lhasa, the provincial capital, has an airport, plus you can fly through airports in several other cities. China, always eager to set construction records, even planned to build another one at 14,550 feet. For now, the project has been put on hold, but if it ever goes through, this airport will be the highest in the world, beating out its competitors, which, by the way, are also located in China. But moving around the airspace in and out of this region is a problem. We open the flight tracking app and notice that not just a lot, but a huge number of planes are flying over China in general. Now take a look here. This is also the flight path over China, but in the Tibet region. As you can notice, there's literally a massive gap in all of Asia's air traffic. At the time when we were putting together this script, there were only a few planes flying there. More often than not, there isn't even a single aircraft being tracked. So why do planes usually fly around this area? It's known that at cruising speed, airplanes usually fly between 30,000 and 43,000 feet. The average height of the Tibetan Plateau, on the other hand, is 14,700 feet. Sure, there are mountains higher than that, but you can just fly around them. Anyways, flying here is possible, but there's this thing called oxygen levels. If the plane experiences decompression, oxygen masks drop down and the captain needs to descend to an altitude with more oxygen, ideally below 10,000 feet. This is where the average altitude of Tibet comes into play. There won't be anywhere for the plane to descend in case of an incident. But that's not all, because there's turbulence created by the mountains. A lot of people who've flown probably know what I mean. So when flying over the Tibetan region, these bumps happen again and again. Not very comfortable. So airplanes in this region are rare and risky. Plus, they're not the best choice when it comes to regular transport of essential and bulky goods like food and other consumer products. Also, flights are just more expensive than alternative travel options. This is where roads come to the rescue. Yeah, the Chinese, of course, laid down a few routes in their autonomous region. This, by the way, is yet another achievement of Chinese builders because building a road through such terrain is no easy task. But they built as many as 4 highways, including one through the most impassable eastern part of Tibet. For example, this is the Sichuan-Tibet road, stretching for over 1,240 miles. It's rightfully called the most beautiful road in China, as during the trip you can see huge elevation changes, glaciers, steppes, mountain canyons, lakes, and rivers. But zigzagging through Tibet is a dangerous thing to do because the road looks like this. Looks cool, of course, but only in the videos because driving on it means constantly watching out so you don't fall off the edge. Also, such a trip will only appeal to those who want to admire the views, because from Chengdu, the capital of Sichuan, to Lhasa, the capital of Tibet, you'll have to drive more than 1,240 miles. The road isn't straight and it's unsafe, so if you expect to drive at 62 miles per hour and get there in one day, it won't work. The trip from one place to the other will take, at best, about 40 hours. And that's in a regular car. Just imagine how long you'd have to drive in a packed truck. It's really unclear. Anyway, it's not the best idea. And now it's finally time to talk about the railway in Tibet, which is called the hardest in the world and the most expensive. No one has ever built a line like this for $50 billion. Plus, it'll be the first electrified railway in the Tibet Autonomous Region and the first high-speed railway on the plateau. Phew, we're done with the records. The project started in 2014, and the Chinese decided to do the construction in a pretty unusual way. Begin from both ends of the road, and only then move to the most interesting part for us, and the hardest one for the builders, the central section. In 2014, they started with an 87-mile railway from Chengdu to Ya'an. The terrain isn't too difficult for construction here. The Sichuan Plains meet the Tibetan Plateau, so there aren't any significant elevation changes, no climate issues, and no difficulties with delivering materials needed for construction. Despite the short length of the route, the railway is already benefiting Sichuan as 10 high-speed intercity trains run on it. Tourism and domestic travel are highly developed there, so the new route to the western part of the province is a nice addition to the existing transportation infrastructure. Besides, it's a quick trip. The train speed in this section of the entire Chinese megaproject can reach 124 miles per hour, which lets you travel from Chengdu to Ya'an in about an hour. So far, everything's been going smoothly without any problems. But if it seems like the challenge has only started with the construction of the central part of the route, that's not the case. Unfortunately for the Chinese builders, the end of the road is in Tibet, that very place where the terrain is the definition of uncertainty. The second leg of the journey, and the last one on the entire route, starts in the capital of the Tibet Autonomous Region, Lhasa, stretches for more than 250 miles, and ends in the city of Nyingchi. The route starts in a more or less normal place for construction and then moves into eastern Tibet, where there are high mountains, deep canyons. Anyway, you can see for yourself from these shots what the terrain is like there. It's good that the Chinese have a lot of experience in building bridges and, of course, creating tunnels using different methods, including tunnel boring machines. They've already drilled thousands of tunnels through every kind of surface you can think of. As a result, the tunnel experience came in handy on this part of the route. They had to drill a whopping 47 tunnels through the rock. In turn, they put in even more bridges, 121 in total, partly because the route crosses the Yarlung-Sangpo River 16 times. Among the bridges, there's one that stands out, the one they had to work hardest on, the Zhangmu Bridge, 1,722 feet long. You've probably already had enough of Chinese records, but we can't pass this one by. Zhangmu is the first bridge in China made from weather-resistant steel without any coating. When they finished the Lassa-Nyingchi road, they immediately started running trains on it to make travel around the region easier. The trains here are also quite special because high-altitude conditions require special transportation. That's why they developed and created the CR200J plateau, which has systems to help with altitude sickness, a combination of diffusive and distribution oxygen systems. The speed of these trains is lower than that of those used for the first part of the mega project, 100 miles per hour, but it's still enough to improve connectivity between parts of the Tibet Autonomous Region. For example, the travel time from Lhasa to Nyingchi has been reduced from 5 hours to 3.5 hours. 90% of the final stretch of the route we just talked about is at an altitude of over 9,800 feet, 75% of which consists of bridges and tunnels. It sounds incredibly difficult, but the Chinese finished it in about 5 years. After that, the last segment remained, the Lassa-Nyingchi stretch, which China saved for later. Chinese media said it is extremely difficult to build this section of the route, and it's hard to argue with that. The length of the central section will be about 620 miles, and it'll go through terrain that can only be described as a builder's nightmare. Those deep canyons, 1.2 to 1.8 miles deep, towering mountains, lakes, rivers. Obviously, the Chinese will have to use their expertise in tunnel construction once more to build this route. However, they'll have to work as carefully as possible in the area. No fast constructions to be expected, even from the Chinese. The thing is, one wrong and very powerful move can cause a collapse, avalanches, and all kinds of other disasters, leading to people dying and equipment worth tens if not hundreds of millions of dollars being destroyed. Plus, it's possible that due to such a disaster, the whole route will have to be changed. On top of the danger of working in eastern Tibet, there's another big problem. It's an area with high seismic activity. The thing is, the tectonic plates have moved in such a way that a fault line is now located in this area. However, the Indian plate continues to push under the Eurasian plate, which is why strong and frequent earthquakes in eastern Tibet are the norm. Here's a map where the dot marks the epicenter of an earthquake. As you can see, they're scattered all over Tibet, but they tend to cluster in the east, meaning they concentrate there. One of the strongest seismic events was the 2008 earthquake in Sichuan. The epicenter was located to the northwest of Chengdu, and the magnitude reached 8. Which caused the shaking to be felt more than 930 miles away in Beijing and Shanghai. As a result of the earthquake, 69,000 people died, 374,000 were injured, and 18,000 were listed as missing. At least 4.8 million people were left homeless, with the number potentially reaching 11 million. The economic damage amounted to 845.1 billion yuan, or about 130 billion US dollars at the exchange rate at the time. After the main shock, between 64 and 104 major aftershocks with magnitudes from 4 to 6.1 were recorded within 72 hours. A few months after the earthquake, it was calculated that the number of aftershocks reached 42,719, of which 246 had a magnitude greater than 4. The most powerful earthquake caused the largest number of geological hazards ever recorded. Around 200,000 landslides were registered, 800 of which blocked rivers. Only this earthquake raises serious questions about the safety of such serious construction projects in mountainous regions, but in addition to it, there have been many other incidents with smaller magnitudes over the past 20 years. Even now, Sichuan and eastern Tibet are frequent quake zones. So the new railroad's an incredibly serious challenge for Chinese designers, engineers, and builders. It's clear why they're being extra cautious with the central section, not just in their actions, but also in their wording when it comes to deadlines. At first, they said the central section would be finished by 2025, but later they pushed the final completion date to 2030. Still, the project will most likely be completed, at the very least because so much has already been built in China, and of course the railroad will speed up the development of the Tibetan region. That's important for everyone. Once finished, the project will make cargo deliveries faster than by truck and will also cut down on the number of flights to a region that's risky for airplanes. Besides, the new, relatively fast and safe route will surely be a reason for Tibet's population to grow, which will be a major boost for the region's much-needed economic development. And then there's tourism. This sector's already been expanding in the region. Tibet saw 41 million visitors in 2021, with revenues exceeding 44 billion yuan, or $7 billion. Looking at the numbers from 2016 to 2020, more than 150 million visitors made the trip to the Himalayas. But with a more convenient route now in place, the number of tourists and the money flowing in is bound to rise. More than that, tourism isn't just about the money people spend on lodging, shopping, and visiting paid attractions. Tourism also means jobs for the locals. For example, in 2020 alone, 27,000 rural residents of the region found work thanks to incoming tourists. Overall, completing the Sichuan-Tibet route will drive well-rounded development in this Chinese autonomous province. Doesn't it seem a bit odd to you that so many people visit such a remote area? The thing is, there's already a railway in that region, the Qinghai-Tibet Railway. It's actually even longer than the planned route, 1,215 miles, and building this railway took the Chinese a huge amount of money and effort too. Why? Because more than 600 miles of this route runs at an altitude of over 13,100 feet. Actually, this railway set yet another record for China. It's the highest in the world, reaching a max elevation of 16,640 feet and featuring the highest train station at 16,630 feet. Just to give you an idea of how extreme this journey is, passengers aren't even allowed to step off the train at that station. It's simply too dangerous because of the insane altitude. Besides, there's the highest altitude tunnel along the way. It was drilled at 16,092 feet. This tunnel through the mountain isn't the longest, but you still have to drive inside it for 4,390 feet. So there's a question. Why build another complex railway route that we've been talking so much about today? The answer's simple. Sichuan is a more developed province than Qinghai, plus it gets more tourists. Bottom line, China's willing to pour tens of billions of dollars, a huge amount of effort and time on insanely dangerous work to speed up Tibet's development. Seriously, wow.